May 2nd of 2018, YouTube Red released a complete Season 1 of Cobra Kai, the most recent installment of the Karate Kid franchise. Previous installments of the franchise include the original 1984 hit movie, which would go on to leave a massive imprint in popular culture, 2 direct sequels, and an early example of a female-centric spin-off sequel, as well as a short-lived 1989 animated series and a 2010 remake. The universally accepted Karate Kid narrative has traditionally been that Danny LaRusso was a kind and timid kid who recently had moved into LA, where he was relentlessly bullied by the evil Johnny Lawrence and his even more evil sensei John Kreese of the Cobra Kai Karate Dojo. This narrative was challenged in 2015 when J. Matthew Turner released a YouTube video which went viral and used the original movie to argue that Johnny Lawrence might not have been all that bad, while LaRusso might not have been all that good. In this roundtable, I am joined by Tom Connors and Rob Gallo.
Hello.
Hello.
And we will cover all aspects of the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, including the original franchise, the new series, if the Cobra Kai philosophy has any merits, and finally, the distribution platform, YouTube Red. But guys, let's kick this off by talking about the original movies. What does the Karate Kid mean to you?
Well, my first exposure to the Karate Kid, actually, I do remember when the film came out in cinemas in 1984. But unfortunately, I didn't see it until a year later when it was on cable. And let me tell you, it is actually a beautiful story. A story of people trying to find balance in their lives, about putting the past behind them, learning to let go of their past, Miyagi learning to let go of his past, Daniel not letting his past impede his future. It really is one of those great motivational movies that I put right up there with like Rocky or The Natural for those living outside the U.S. It's a baseball movie starring Robert Redford. And it still resonates to this day to me. Unfortunately, it did not motivate me to take up karate. I played baseball very badly, and I always tell people that I have all the mobility of probably a dead elephant. So I'm not the most agile person ever. So unfortunately, that did not motivate me to take up karate. So I had other sports on my plate. Those didn't pan out, which is why I'm doing a podcast. I felt the stories drew a very sort of black and white picture of both characters. I thought Daniel was really the good guy, and then Johnny Lawrence was really the quintessential bad guy. Cobra Kai was, just a nest of vipers, in other words. But now you see more depth to the characters. Maybe Johnny wasn't so bad. Johnny had a lot of bad things happen to him, and you can see how that can affect somebody. Daniel had a lot of good things, but he became a smug asshole in the process. So there's a lot more gray area now, looking back at it, than we initially see. And I think that kind of depth that you can add to something really shows you how well thought out this new series is. As far as the sequels, I've seen the Karate Kid Part 2, I've seen the Karate Kid Part 3. I have not seen the Jaden Smith version, nor do I want to. And that's actually where that brings us to now, is the Cobra Kai series, which I think is actually, like I said, I thought this was going to be a nostalgia trip, and it actually turned out to be wrong. It was actually very well done.
I vaguely remember seeing the film for the first time when it came out on VHS. Fell in love with it instantly. The film was not only a cultural phenomenon from the year 1984, which was already full of smash hit films with huge impact on pop culture in the world, like Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Beverly Hills Cop, Nightmare on Elm Street, just to name a few. Karate Kid was also one of the first films I remember falling in love with that wasn't like a cartoon, Superman, Star Wars, some type of franchise type film. Or at least not yet, anyway. And for my age, we were around 4 or 5 at the time. I'd actually think it was 4. That kind of says a lot. The first movie was an instant classic and is still referenced to this day, even prior to the reunion show coming out. Karate Kid is a great example, like Back to the Future, where everything on screen is there for a reason and all the setups pay off big time later on in the film. I think a lot of people forget that Pat Morita was nominated for an Oscar for his role as Miyagi. I remember the sequel coming out more so, being that it was one of the few sequels at the time to outgross the original. And personally, I enjoyed it as much as the original. I think the second film is a great example that often gets overlooked as a sequel that extends the story and doesn't just retread the first. The third film in the animated series, I enjoyed them, of course, but they're not as good as the first two films. The fourth film, at times it's one of those movies that's so good it's bad type movie, and others it's a decent spin-off sequel for the most part, but otherwise it's pretty much just a cash-in by Sony. The remake was a mess and should have been called Kung Fu Kid or something else, not Karate Kid. But anyway, aside from Jackie Chan, there's really nothing worth mentioning about that movie, in my opinion. The series was a huge influence on me, though, getting me into martial arts, including taking some Taekwondo and stuff like that, and they've just been perennial favorites of mine ever since they came out. Andre?
My opinion is going to be slightly different from yours. I did see the original Karate Kid on VHS in the 80s and didn't love it. I wasn't old enough at the time to like fully appreciate it, but I didn't like Daniel LaRusso, and so I didn't really like the movie. Like, I picked up on the fact that this is kind of like a really arrogant, smug little kid, and pretty aggressive at that too. So I didn't really sympathize with him, and that kind of like colored my opinion of the movie, which I did not love. I liked it fine, but I didn't love it. It didn't really mean anything to me. I saw the movies number 2 and 3 across the next decade, and again I liked them fine, had halfway forgotten the first by then, so they meant even less to me. The fourth one I've never seen. The remake, and this is gonna shock and anger loads of people, but I actually like it, and I'm not gonna pretend otherwise. I really enjoyed the remake. I think it's a stronger movie than the original. It should be said though, of course it is a remake. And now I can appreciate the original on its own merits much more than I could then when I first saw it. But still, I think that Jackie Chan does so much for that movie. And I really appreciate the setting, that it's in China, that it has all of this kung fu philosophy and everything, which I'm much more into. So I appreciate that movie. I'm just bitter at Sony for calling it the Karate Kid, when karate had nothing to do with it whatsoever. I actually did study martial arts at one point. I have a few years of Taekwondo behind me, but the Karate Kid movies had nothing to do with that. If anyone inspired me, it was the likes of Jean-Claude Van Damme, Brian Genesi, or Olivier Gruner. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, that's my opinion of the Karate Kid franchise, which I'm sure is going to be an unpopular one. But that aside, let's move on to the newest installment, Cobra Kai. How did you learn about Cobra Kai, and what was your opinion on the trailer? Rob?
I learned about it just by being on YouTube. YouTube, obviously, they run a lot of ads before videos now, and that was one of the ads they ran. And I thought to myself, man, really, do we have to do this again? I thought it was just going to be a blatant kind of cash grab at nostalgia. And my expectations were minimal going in, but they were surprisingly subverted. Tom, what about you?
I remember seeing and getting a kick out of the viral video that Andre mentioned in the intro years ago. And as soon as I heard about this, that instantly came to mind. So I vaguely remember hearing about it. But I think it kind of went under our radar here until the trailer come out. And that's the first time I really remember it being a part of my consciousness. And the first trailer felt like perhaps this was going to be a bit more of a satire and a comedy more so. So I was a bit worried. But as more and more trailers and clips were released, I got more excited about it. And yeah, needless to say, I was very pleasantly surprised. But we'll get right into that. Andre?
Yeah, as for me, I actually knew of the series before the trailers, because like it has been announced and stuff like that ever since the latter half of 2017. And I didn't read anything in detail. I didn't know that the original stars were back, but I did know that there was like this Karate Kid sequel called Cobra Kai in the works. And I did actually remember Cobra Kai, because that's one of the things that stuck out from the original movie enough that I did remember. And then the trailer showed up, and I was blown away by it instantly, because I absolutely love these things where you have like sequels to long dormant franchises with the original cast all coming back, or at least in part coming back, years or decades later, like with Rocky Balboa or Rambo, to name two Stallone examples. I'm a huge fan of those kinds of things in general, so I was excited and I was blown away by the trailers. I knew right away that holy shit, this I gotta see. Even if I don't have that much nostalgia for the original movies, I was really excited for Cobra Kai. Now that is what we've all felt going in. Now we have all binged the series over the course of the last few days. So guys, what is your overall impression of it? Rob.
Wow. Like I said, I had minimal expectations going in, but then I started watching and I said, wow, this is really good. And then by the end, I was like, why isn't this on real television? This is the kind of stuff we need to see. I was blown away by it. I'm like, it didn't seem possible that they could do this that well, but they did. Those are my overall impressions. I love the fact that they were able to bring much of the original cast back. I absolutely love that. I also like that you got more depth to the characters, as I said before. You know, you get to see Johnny down on his luck, Daniel's doing well, but it doesn't paint a black and white picture of who these people are in 2018. The other thing I liked was, yes, it was a nostalgia trip, but they showed you what you wanted to see. They showed you the tournament. They showed you kids fighting. They showed you Miyagi's house. And to me, that gave me a chill. I'm like, oh, it was this great kind of mystic place. And, you know, you felt that there's some sort of positive energy there, and you get to see it, and it's been kept up, and Daniel's been keeping it up all these years. And as Tom said, they give you a sense of payoff to all these things. What I disliked it, I honestly dislike the delivery method. That's the main thing. I dislike this being on YouTube Red. I'm not sure what else I can say I disliked. I did like also that they really played up the 80s aspects. They spared no expense. They licensed all the 80s music. But again, the main thing I disliked was the delivery method. I really would have liked to see this on Netflix or some other service that you don't
more
have
accessible
to...
service.
Something
yeah.
more accessible, yeah, because honestly, who has YouTube Red? I mean, you're going to subscribe to it just for this?
And I look, there is nothing else on there worth noting as far as YouTube Red originals. So
that's my main gripe with this, that the delivery service that it's on. Tom, what about you?
Well, I'll start off with that, because YouTube Red was a nightmare to work with, to begin with. To try and watch it off my PS4, I had to go through all kinds of hoops. I finally did watch it, and I watched it a second time while I was working on other things, because I liked it that much. I don't want to bury the lead, but this is probably one of the best shows I've seen in I don't know how many years. And it has nothing to do with my nostalgia, because like, you know, Rob and Andre just said, they had a lot less than I did going into it, especially Andre, and he loved it too. So any moment, this could have went off the rails. Like, it could have went that wrong direction. You know, it's like the first setup from the very first moment. You're like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. They're going to put Johnny in the Mr. Miyagi role. You know, oh, he's got a kid. Oh, Daniel's going to start training him. Types of things that feel very telegraphed, but the execution was so perfect. They took it seriously, even with the humor. They never played down to the audience. They paid off everything. They took these characters and treated them with so much respect, considering. It's astounding, because like I said, at first the trailer almost made it look like they were making fun of the whole concept. And they did have fun with a lot of the concept, don't get me wrong, but they did it just right. And they never did it at the expense of making fun of the Karate Kid. They had fun with it, but not making fun of it. I didn't like at first how they treated Diaz in the last few episodes, but I have a feeling that that's going to come into play later on, because I think that near the end, Johnny's realizing that a lot of what he's teaching these kids is not the right way, and I have a feeling that the next season's really going to get into a lot of that, but that's going down the road, of course. I just can't give this series enough praise as far as how well it handled everything. And Rob's right, they really hindered themselves by first of all putting it on YouTube Red. Second of all, the first two episodes are great, but the real story doesn't start kicking in until about episode 3 or 4. So they did themselves a disservice there. They could have done so much better. And not only that, why didn't they just make all the episodes available, but just have ads running with them instead? You know, oh, I can get YouTube Red and not watch the ads, or I can watch them with a few ads, whatever. They would have had a huge hit on their hands, because this show is so well done that, like I said, it blows so many other shows I've seen out of the water in the last few years in comparison, especially when it comes to these reunion type shows or movies like this. I mean, I thought Ash vs. the Evil Dead was hilariously clever, and this even tops that. So,
you know what? If I could just interject for a moment, you said this series is so well written. To me, it observes Gene Roddenberry's original Prime Directive. You remember what that is, right? Remember, there's intelligent life on the other side of the camera.
Oh yeah, and it does, and it acknowledges, like I said, I can't believe how much they actually acknowledged the third film. And you talked about the Miyagi scene at the end with his house. The scene that got me was the scene in the graveyard.
Oh,
it literally brought tears to my eyes.
That's a tearjerker, yeah.
That scene, because it was like Pat Morita was watching over him or something. And I don't even believe in that kind of mystical stuff, really. But it was like he was making sure that they were never going to go off the rails with this. And it could have, like I said, I don't know how many times at any moment gone completely off the rails in any one of the episodes and derailed the whole series. But it didn't. It managed to stay on course the whole time. Andre?
Yeah, like you guys, there's no nostalgia here because, as we've established, I don't have any. And I loved this series. I thought this was really, really good, and I really enjoyed watching it. What I liked the most was that, of course, you got so many of the original cast back, and that we were like treated to the different perspectives. That there was no more of this Danny Goody Two-Shoes narrative, which you didn't really have in the original movie, but that was the perception of it. Whereas here you get a more balanced picture. I'm not saying that Lawrence was a good guy, because he wasn't, but he wasn't as bad as the original movie would leave you believing, and Danny certainly was nowhere as good, whereas here you get more of a balance. And I really enjoyed the drama, I really enjoyed the interaction between the two, so really all good throughout. The only thing that I did not like about the series was the inclusion of Johnny Lawrence's son, and how he went to train with Danny LaRusso. To me, that's where I almost tuned out. That was like, this is like too over-the-top Hollywood drama, just for the sake of drama. Like, throw in some extra family relation here, where none is natural. Yeah, I get the series justification for it, but it lost me a little bit right there. That's my one gripe with it. Other than that, I thought the whole series was absolutely fantastic. And I especially liked the ending with, spoiler alert, Krennic returning. What disappointed me tremendously was earlier in the series, where Johnny Lawrence said that Krennic was dead. Maybe he believed that, I don't know. But my reaction to that was like, oh fuck, I wanted to see Martin Cove return, because I'm a huge fan of Martin Cove. Not from the original movie, he was good in that, but from another guilty pleasure of mine, Project Shadow Chaser, in which he hams it up completely, and I became a fan after that. And then seeing him return, I was so happy about that. So yeah, huge fan of the series.
It wouldn't be the first time he'd faked his death in the series, if that's the case. But then again, it was almost like Johnny knew he was still alive the way he acted, but it was just like, oh fuck, he didn't have to show up, did he? You know, kind of thing.
It's like, oh crap. Yeah, you got the sense he was just saying, oh no, now what? Like, yeah, the one guy he almost didn't want to walk through the door did. That's the feeling that I got.
I mean, they did give Johnny a little bit of redemption in the beginning of the second film, but they never really did give him his just dues. So he got them finally here. And at least now we finally are going to get to see him face to face. How is he going to act? Is he going to cower? Is he going to turn into a little baby? Or is he finally going to stand up to him? Is he going to turn around and tell him, you know, you're the reason my life is so fucked up?
Yeah, you get kind of a Vader Palpatine kind of vibe, yeah, from that relationship.
Yeah, because I would imagine that Krennic is going to come and assert his dominance, and it's going to take a while for Lawrence to fight back against it. That's probably going to be like the arc of Season 2, I should imagine. Because if he was going to resist him right away, saying, no, this is mine now, get the hell out of here. If he just did that, that would have been the perfect way to end Season 1. Since he appears as a stinger for Season 2, there's got to be so much more to it.
I think we're going to have a lot more calling back to Part 3, because you can genuinely tell that Johnny has no idea what went down with Terry Silver and all that kind of crap when he's in the meeting. So I have a feeling that's going to come to the table, and I have a feeling that Johnny's going to be torn between knowing that this all went down, the way he was treated all these years, and his conflict, but not only that, his loyalty for his mentor and sensei at the same time, because this guy was a father figure to him. This guy was a very important part of his life, despite the fact that they had a falling out. I'm sure there's still a lot of stuff there that needs to be worked out. So I have a feeling that the angle is going to switch just a little bit in the second season, to where it's going to be more so Johnny trying to find his own balance between the old Cobra Kai style, like strike first, strike hard, no mercy kind of thing, as opposed to the Miyagi style karate, which I'm sure he's going to learn a little bit through Daniel and his son. And like Andre, at first when they brought his son into the mix, I was like, no, don't do this, please don't. And it got really hammy for a little bit, but they brought it back around and it worked. And I have a feeling that's going to pay off even more so in the second season, because I have a feeling that Johnny is going to start becoming his son's student in a way, because he's going to start learning a little bit more of the other side of things. Notice the impact that the Miyagi-Do karate had on Robbie throughout the show. I think that you're going to see the same kind of thing echoing onto Johnny, and that's going to be the conflict there, is he's going to have Kreese on one end and his son on the other kind of thing. And at the same time seeing through Diaz what he created with Diaz and Hawk and all those kids, because now they're basically more of a nightmare than he was at their age.
And that's an excellent point. Let's get into that. The Cobra Kai philosophy, which basically says strike first, strike hard, no mercy. We saw in the original movie and in the third movie that this basically brought out the worst in everyone, and Miyagi himself even said there is no such thing as a bad student, it is only a bad teacher. And this was exemplified by Krennic and Cobra Kai, which Daniel LaRusso was completely allergic towards because he had such negative associations with Cobra Kai and everything it stood for. Yet Johnny Lawrence, when he employed those tactics to a bunch of kids who society labels nerds and losers, the kids without self-esteem, who can't get a date, who are scoffed and laughed at, and the absolute bottom of the pecking order, what happened? They got self-esteem, and they rose in the pecking order. What's your take on this? Is there anything good about the Cobra Kai philosophy?
Well, the good thing about it is the main lesson that he really wanted to drive home to his students was to stand up for yourself. You know, have confidence. Have confidence in who you are, and and what you believe in. Unfortunately, he had a horrible way of teaching it. Whereas the students, the philosophy that Mr. Miyagi had was, you have self-esteem where you find balance in all things in your life, and you maintain that. There's a thing I like to point out about how, and you see, actually, it was a great thing about the one student, Hawk. Eli Moskowitz, or whatever his name was, who transformed himself into Hawk. I would point out to someone, and this is going back and forth in the dating world. I was one of those kids who was sort of borderline loser. Unfortunately, I didn't take martial arts, which might have helped. And I would hear all the time, you gotta have confidence, I would say, you take a look at a guy, and this is a sports analogy for people who work with me. Take a look at a guy like Wayne Gretzky. Would you guess that he's the greatest hockey player who ever put on a pair of skates? No, because he doesn't have to advertise. He carries himself with quiet dignity and a cool confidence, as opposed
to Miyagi, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like Miyagi. I'm like, what do I have to? I don't have to break boards. What do I have to prove to you? And you see somebody like Deion Sanders, with the flashy car and the gold chains and the flashy suits. I'm like, there's a guy who's may seem confident, but he's arrogant. He's cocky. That's not real confidence. And so I kind of see the Cobra Kai philosophy as that. I mean, it's teaching. It might be teaching power, but it's not teaching strength, really. The strength of oneself, the strength of one's beliefs, the strength of your inner peace and finding yourself. That's what I kind of think about that. Tom?
I think Andre brought up a good point before, which they did bring up again, Daniel did, that there's no such thing as a bad student, there's only bad teachers. And I think that's going to, as I said, play a bigger part going forward, as this first season was probably a real learning curve for Johnny to realize that the Cobra Kai way works only to a point, but you have to have balance. And that's one thing that Daniel and Mr. Miyagi and that karate always really pushed was you have to have balance. And Daniel wasn't always such a goody-goody two-shoes in the first few movies either. If you remember in the third film, he had a very dark turn, and that was the whole point, was Miyagi pulling him back from that dark side of overconfidence and all this other stuff that he was going through at that time, especially as a young man at that age. I think that this series is going to be kind of, instead of it being about the students, it's going to be more about the teachers. And I think going forward, especially, that's why they brought back in Martin Kove's character, because I think that that's really what it's going to be about at its core, is how Daniel and Johnny view themselves as mentors. And as I said, you're going to have that push and pull between, Johnny dealing with what was right about Cobra Kai and what didn't work with these kids, seeing through Diaz how he turned out, and Hawk and the aggressiveness, and how strike first and strike hard and no mercy may not necessarily be the way of karate, because it really does go against what karate stands for. And I think he's going to learn a lot about that in this next season. I really do. So, I mean, as far as the philosophy overall, yeah, it works to a point, but I think the big point the series was getting to overall is you have to have balance. And without that balance there, you get aggressive, violent people who will not wait for a situation to escalate and defend themselves, but actually cause the situations. Andre?
Yeah, no, I agree completely with what you said about up to a certain point. Because here we have the contrast between the philosophy of Cobra Kai and the philosophy of Miyagi, which is all about balance. Let's just first look at the philosophy of Miyagi. If we go back to the original 1984 movie, we see that Daniel LaRusso is clearly a pretty aggressive guy. He's already assertive. He will not hesitate for a second with going to the counter-attack if he perceives an attack. He has no qualms about sucker punching, jumping someone, whatever. Like, this is a fairly aggressive kid, and so he needs some balance in his life. So Miyagi's teachings are perfect for him. However, if we look at some of Johnny Lawrence's students in Cobra Kai, these are, as I mentioned earlier, the lowest of the pecking order. The kids without self-esteem. They don't need any balance in their lives right now. They need to harden up a little bit. They need to increase their self-esteem. They need to feel good about themselves. And there are many ways that they can do that. I'm not convinced that Miyagi's teachings would be the best way to do it, giving them more peace, more serenity, more balance, especially when peace and serenity is something that you have a little bit too much of, which is why they're at the bottom of the pecking order. So for these kids, Cobra Kai might be just what the doctor ordered, and we see it works. But it might work too well, because people who have been completely bereft of power, and they suddenly feel it, they can get power high. And that is what you see a little bit with Hawk, for instance, who only donned this mohawk to get attention away from his cleft palate and the scar in his lip. But it really works. He feels really good about himself. He gets much more assertive, way too much so. And therein lies the danger of Cobra Kai. If you apply that to someone who is already of normal self-esteem and assertive, they're gonna get really aggressive, because that kind of is inherent in the no mercy part, which is the biggest problem. That's when they get to the point where LaRusso already was. Now is when they need Miyagi's teachings. And I think that is going to be the arc of Season 2. We saw towards the end here that Lawrence realized that, oh crap, I went a little bit too far. These kids fight dirty. That's not what I meant at all. Maybe they mean something else, or maybe they understand something else with no mercy than I do.
Right, and I think he'll also see through his son, who was a problem child to begin with, how he made a complete turnaround with Daniel. So I think that, like I said, that's going to really show Johnny that there is more to this than what he sees, because Kreese's karate comes from, well, he was in the war, he was taught to kill, that was it, strike first, strike hard, no mercy. As opposed to, like I just said, the whole point of karate, the whole philosophy at its heart is defense. So I think it's going to take Johnny, he's got to find that balance in both ends. And I'm sure by the end of the series, they'll both learn to work together, to teach together is what's going to happen. But like I said, I think you got a good point, is that he's going to learn that both their philosophies need to meld to make the perfect students. And I think both sides are going to learn that, as far as Daniel's also going to see, like you brought up earlier, as far as to him, he's allergic to it, was a good way of putting it. But I think over time, he's going to learn and that he's got to really start to listen to what he's saying too, in a sense that it's not the students, it's the teacher. And as long as he can get to Johnny, I'm sure he'll start to realize that these kids aren't the problem, even though he basically flat out, says to his daughter, don't hang out with these kids, which he's holding them accountable for Johnny's past, basically. And that really, I think, is going to be another big factor going. And they really did set themselves up with so much rich stuff to get into in several seasons going forward. And almost, this is one of those few times where I think 2 or 3 more episodes would have really rounded this off better. Because it really feels like near the end, those last few episodes, as things get really breakneck fast, like they're trying to get it done so they can fit it in those last few episodes. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but if it would have had just like another episode or two to breathe, maybe.
It did feel a little rushed towards the end. Like we want to get to the big fight scene, we want to pay this off, so we have to hurry up and close this out. Yeah. It did start to feel a tad bit rushed toward the end, but it was still satisfying.
Oh yeah. Just maybe 1 or 2 more episodes. I think it would have felt just that little bit. It would have had just that little bit more room to breathe. But of course, another possible cameo set up for next season. I don't know if anybody kind of picked up on that. How much you guys want to bet we see Elizabeth Shue in the next season?
I'll bet that we don't.
I used to love her. Oh, that was my dream girl.
They talked about her quite a bit, so I have a feeling, I don't know.
Yeah, but they only talked about her because she is like the one girl they had in common. Like, if you look back at their rivalry, it really can be traced to her. Because LaRusso was making a move on what Johnny perceived to be his girl. And of course, in the end, she dumped both of them. She already dumped Johnny and never went back to him, and 6 months after the first movie, well, she dumped Daniel too, and in a really bad way, I might add.
The reason I think she's going to show up is because they're both still hung up on her, and like you said, she is the key ingredient to why they don't get along. So I have a feeling that once they have a moment with her, they both will realize how stupid this rivalry has been all these years, and they really need to start to work together for these kids.
I was about to say, either she'll be the peacemaker, or they'll both say, man, what a bitch, what did we ever see in her?
I got to disagree a little bit with that, though, because she might have been the spark that set off the rivalry. But after that spark was set off, they managed to keep it alive and keep it growing ever stronger, completely fine, all on their own. Like, this is the kind of case where you have a conflict and give it enough time and people will have forgotten why the conflict even started in the first place. This is not a perfect example of that. So no, I don't think that we're ever going to see her. Because basically we saw that they went into her Facebook profile and saw that, yeah, she married some doctor and she's really wealthy, living the life off in wherever. So I think that's basically just indicating that she's not part of the series. She has no role in it. There is no reason why they ever need to see their teenage sweetheart from 34 years ago ever again. Like, this isn't High Fidelity. Like, these guys aren't so hung up over her. They're hung up on each other and their rivalry. But I really don't think that we'll be seeing Elizabeth Shue. If she shows up in a cameo, then yeah, sure. But to me, at least, it would be forced. Because I don't see any narrative reason why she should be there. But that's my opinion. I could be wrong.
Well, like I said, here's the thing is, like I said, they bring her up quite a bit. They have the picture there and Johnny's, reminiscing. And obviously Daniel's thought about her over the years. I think they were planting that seed there, at least. Because after the first movie, Daniel's the one who really kept the rivalry going in a way, because Johnny gave him his props at the end of the first film, gave him his trophy. Miyagi helped Johnny out of a bind at the end. They never had another conflict after that. In the beginning of the film, Johnny doesn't want anything more than just to avoid him, and he does everything he can to almost avoid him and not cause any conflict with Daniel. It's Daniel who kind of really starts the conflict in this time around. So I think that that's really going to play into the second part, where I think they really are going to bring to light a little bit more. But you could be right. In the overall scheme, no, she doesn't. But I think that there's going to have to be a moment, a little bit stronger moment than them in the bar, where they realize that this has just gone on long enough and we need to work together, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, that's way down the series, I'm sure.
Yeah. But it's a good point, though, that, yeah, you're completely right. LaRusso, ever since the first movie, he is the one that's been the antagonist, and he's been the aggressor in an otherwise aggressorless situation. So that's very much in his character. which is why he needs Miyagi's teachings, and you see that in this series. When Miyagi isn't there, then he goes on with these crazy aggressive actions. Like for instance, he organizes events so that the price in that entire mall is doubled. Not just for Johnny and Cobra Kai, but for everyone else there. Does not think about consequences. And that might be one of the reasons why he is so worried about Cobra Kai. Because he probably knows deep within himself, what kind of monster I would be if I was subject to Cobra Kai teachings.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I think that's going to be a big part going forward. And his wife makes that point, and she's kind of that voice of reason that reminds him where he came from. And that's when he starts to clean out the dojo and get all his stuff back out and starts to remember about Miyagi and goes forward. So, like I said, I do think that's going to be a big part of it. And they've always made Daniel a flawed hero. They've never made him too much of a goody-goody two-shoes, even though they do play that up in this episode, the show a little bit. But I did like the dynamic there that, like you said, the way he acted without Miyagi around, they did that perfectly, because that's the way he acted in the third and second film whenever he would go against what Miyagi was trying to teach him, and he would learn that, oh shit, I was supposed to listen and I fucked this whole thing up, and that's kind of where he finds himself here too.
He loses his way, in other words. He loses his way and he has to find his way back.
So clearly, there are a lot of philosophical themes going on in Cobra Kai, and there's loads of rooms for development in every area going forward for future seasons. If there are any, which we don't know, because who knows how YouTube Red is going to be, because this is the first original high-profile series on YouTube Red. Which begs the question, why not Netflix, Amazon, or any others? Why YouTube Red? Guys, what are your initial thoughts on this? Rob?
The irony here is we're on YouTube, so I think it really sucks that this is not reaching a wider audience. I mean, I have cinemablend.com up, and they're saying that the first episode was streamed by 5.4 million people over the course of its first day.
It's up to 15 million as of this recording.
But at the same time, what is it doing on YouTube Red? I don't know. And to me, I don't see a reason to subscribe to YouTube Red. Yes, this was great, this series, but they don't have anything else. And this really kind of pisses me off, because, what, I'm going to add another streaming service?
Well, they do have one thing, though. If you subscribe to YouTube Red, you get to see Midnight's Edge videos without commercials. There's that.
Yes, YouTube, yes. Don't forget, kids, you get to see Midnight's Edge uninterrupted on YouTube Red. So, there's that, yeah. So, way to bite the hand that feeds us. Isn't that right, guys? Tom, what do you
Let's be careful here, guys.
Well, I look at it this way, like I just brought up. The first episode has over 15 million views, and it hasn't even been up a week. I mean, if you subtract a certain amount of people that probably wouldn't have gone anyway if it was in a theater, you're still looking at a movie that would have made anywhere from $75 to $100 million its opening weekend. Close to it. That tells me that this was not planned out very well. I don't know what the situation is, because Sony actually owns the rights to the Karate Kid, along with, I think, Will Smith, Overbrook, or whatever it is, his production company, or whatever it is, has a big... because he's actually one of the executive producers. But point is, I'm surprised they didn't try to push Crackle with it, like they did Joe Dirt 2, being it's Sony, and Sony owns Crackle.
I know exactly why it is on YouTube Red, and I'm very happy to share that knowledge with you all. This is something that we have covered very extensively before here on Midnight's Edge, especially in my editorials. And that is basically the modern format war between digital streaming services. The thing to keep in mind here is that the digital companies, and then I mean the Silicon Valley companies, like Google, Apple, Amazon, all of these companies here, they can buy all of the Hollywood studios, all of them, several times over. They have that much money. And they look at what Netflix has been doing and how big Netflix is. And make no mistake about it, the market value of Netflix is far greater than any of the Hollywood studios. It doesn't rival the Silicon Valley majors, but it's bigger than any Hollywood studio. And that's all because of shifting viewer habits. with more and more people abandoning the cinema experience, at least to some extent, abandoning traditional TV and going for digital streaming instead. Netflix has cornered that market, HBO have a huge share in it, and Amazon are really aggressive trying to get their part. And this, so far, is Google's answer. Google, they own YouTube. That's the thing to keep in mind here. Google, if they wanted, they could launch their own streaming service tomorrow. But since they already have YouTube and a massive installed user base with YouTube, they might as well try to make YouTube into their Netflix competitor and Amazon competitor with YouTube Red. And that is the first foray we're seeing right here with Cobra Kai. Because there was a bidding war between Hulu and Netflix and Amazon. They all wanted this. But Google and YouTube just wanted it more. And why do they want it? Well, basically for the exact same reason that CBS wanted Star Trek Discovery. They didn't really care about the brand so much. They wanted to use it as a means to conquer more subscribers for their digital service. That is the corporate motivation here for YouTube to put this on YouTube Red. Make no mistake about it, they paid, and they paid loads for it. And what do they want? They want subscribers to YouTube Red, their own digital service. That's their end game here. And what I think is really interesting is when I look at these numbers, we see that the first episode has 15 million views as of right now. And we are recording this 4 days after the episode was uploaded. Yesterday, 3 days in. You could see the download numbers or the view numbers for all the episodes. For episode 2, for episode 3, for episode 4. At the time of this recording, those numbers are hidden. And of course they can hide them. They're YouTube, they can hide whatever they want. And they only show the first episode, which was released for free along with the second one. Now that's really interesting. You know what that tells me?
What does that tell you?
It tells me that 15 million views. That means that there's an audience here of maybe, say, 10 million plus people who want to see the entire series. Probably more. And most of those 10 million are going to pirate it. Yeah, there's going to be a huge amount of people who subscribe to YouTube Red. But it was really cool yesterday, because then you had like 5-6 million views on the first 2 episodes. And the next episodes were in a couple of hundreds of thousands. That's the number of people who subscribed to YouTube Red. Whereas what you don't see are all the people who torrent this. That's the thing where they almost made the mistake that Netflix doesn't do. They gave away the numbers. Of course, that was a mistake that they fixed really fast. So how is this going to work for them? We'll just have to see. Personally, I'm not happy about it at all. Because no good can come from these streaming services competing against each other. That's just a new format war all over. And just as we've talked about in earlier videos, what's going to happen is that they're going to use these beloved branded properties like Karate Kid in YouTube, like Conan and Lord of the Rings for Amazon, and who knows what else, who knows who's going to pick up Judge Dredd down the line. And they're going to pit them against each other, and there's going to be casualties. Because we all talk about Season 2 as if it's a certain thing. But what if it bombs here? What if YouTube Red is a flop? And they have no interest in pursuing anymore if Google decides to change their policy. Are Netflix going to swoop in and pick up Season 2? Or do they have enough other things to worry about? The risk with putting this on YouTube Red is that we might not get to Season 2.
Yeah, that's what pisses me off more than anything, because as I said in the outset, I had a lot of issues with YouTube Red, and I'm on their 30-day free trial, which they even use as an advertisement in the end of the second episode to get you to go over here. But that's what doesn't make any sense to me, just like with CBS All Access. What do they have there to maintain their audience? Nothing. They have nothing else there. The only thing YouTube has is a few other features that you don't get with normal YouTube. But point being, this was a dumb move. Like I said before, why are they not putting this out complete season with ads? And okay, you can get it ad free otherwise. The ads should be able to sustain or even make more money for them in the long run than they would on this YouTube Red thing. And like you said, it's just a piss poor attempt, much like CBS All Access, to use this as a platform to launch on something that has nothing else to offer the audience after that. So who's going to stick around?
You answered your own question.
Right.
That's the whole reason. If they wanted people to see the series, they would have released it for free with commercials. But they don't want people to see it for free. They want you to subscribe to YouTube Red, and they want to use this series as a means to reach that end. That's why.
Yeah. Well, you brought up before. Yeah. As you were gonna say, they're shooting themselves in the foot because now they're just splitting the audience now too between all these different subscriber-based services. I mean, if everyone's gonna have a franchise player, to borrow a sports term, then really everybody's just gonna sort of choose their own service. Well, you know, I'm a Netflix guy. Well, I'm a Hulu guy. Well, I'm a YouTube Red guy. Well, I'm a CBS
Disney
All Access guy.
DC Universe.
Yeah. But that's the tragedy here. This is the tragedy of the commons. If they all work together and they all agree on one platform, then everyone is going to win, especially the audience. However, if they don't work together, if they fight it out, and one winner emerges on top, well then that one winner, or the 2 or 3 winners, they take it all. They take such a huge, enormous market and become a new de facto standard format. Again, this is what format wars are all about, and this is a format war being fought out. Yeah, it would be a nice thing if they would work together, but not very capitalist thing. And these people, the ones making these decisions, they have the money to burn. They take very little risk on this. Yeah, YouTube or Google, they paid a crap ton for Cobra Kai. But to them, it's just a pawn for a bigger game.
Ain't that the truth?
And as I said before, they're using then our beloved properties as pawns. And they are going to be sacrificed. And maybe there's going to be a season 2 of Cobra Kai. Maybe there's going to be a season 3, 4, and 5. Or maybe this is all there is. That we don't know. That is the price to pay, and properties like this will be the casualties of the digital streaming service format war. For more on this, feel free to check out my editorials.
Well, hopefully, despite all that, we do get a season 2, and that's probably as good a place as any to end this conversation, and hopefully we pick it up with season 2. So, Rob, tell everybody what they can do if they like what we do here.
You can click the subscribe button, and you can ring the bell icon, so that way you'll be notified of all the latest updates that are to content that is uploaded. And you can subscribe to the sister channel, Midnight's Edge After Dark, where we do short-form commentary, and the long-form commentary will appear on Midnight's Edge. Isn't that right, Tom?
That's right, on top of all kinds of other good stuff, including some exclusive content you can only find on Patreon.
Yes, and as I always say, if you really enjoy the stuff we do, you really like the channel, then why not consider supporting the channel through Patreon? Patreon subscribers will receive all kinds of benefits. Early notification of mini-documentaries, uncut audio for mini-documentaries, lost episodes, outtakes, bloopers, special, behind-the-edge making-of videos. Patreon tiers for support start for as little as $1 a month. And if you can't support the channel financially through Patreon, then please click the bell icon, click subscribe, share this video with your friends, because as I always say, we cannot do this without you. So one more time for everybody here at Midnight's Edge, I am Mr. Rob Robot Shlomo. For Tom Connors and Andre, we'd like to thank you for joining us for this Cobra Kai Roundtable, and we will catch you next time.